Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. I'm Jill Robinson, back from holiday. Pleased to be with you here for TRG 30, where every other week, as Stephen described, we talk about bold change for our sector's resilience. And resilience, as we look to 2022 and beyond, is the name of the game. Today, we'll be talking about an important facet of our resilience, exploring one organization's fight for racial equity in our sector. Today, I am pleased to introduce to you that organization that we have the privilege of partnering with. We're talking to representatives from the Black Opera Alliance today about their advocacy work to expose the systems of racial inequity and their challenge to institutions to make drastic changes. Dr. Derrell, Acon, Ibukun, Babalola, welcome to TRG 30 today. You both, I am so pleased that we can be together at this virtual table to talk about this change that really is required in racial justice and in equity required. It's an R word. There's another R word, resiliency, that we've been talking about at TRG 30 since the beginning of the pandemic. And these two issues and ideas are absolutely positively intertwined. Welcome and say hello, if you would, just for a moment, to everyone here in this virtual room today.
Great. Thank you, Jill. Very happy to be here, and hello to everyone watching. We're excited for a brief but robust and important conversation, and we're happy to be here with you.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Jill and TRG, for having us.
Listen, with what I said as a preface, required and resiliency, I'd like to start our conversation today with just a little bit of background to make sure everyone understands a bit of the journey that you've been on. BOA started, it emerged in June of last year, and there was a lot happening in June of last year. And as I reflect on what I've learned about your organization and have talked to both of you, it strikes me that you have been balancing a polarity really between the insistence and appropriate demand and impatience of this work, with also an invitation and a desire for partnership within the field. So just talk with us a little bit about that background, your journey, your membership, which is quite large. Take the mic and go.
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, June of 2020, it began as what we called a cookout, and Black folks coming together to discuss things that were going on. We were taking a moment during the pandemic, when so many folks, their contracts had been canceled, to just reflect. And what was immediately apparent was that there was so much more than what could possibly be discussed within. I think we budgeted maybe 3 hours and ended up being like 4.5 hours. Even that wasn't enough. And so this organization, which began as a Facebook group, really came out of that. And folks, I remember that first week after that first meeting, just the flow, the outpouring of comments and posts and resources in the Facebook group, told all of us this is something that we need to really continue to intentionally curate. This is a space that we need. And I think a lot of folks in the industry, first of all, did not realize how, even though we're not monolithic, this field, because there is a white supremacist structure, and an undercurrent happening, our experiences are similar, and that we are all facing those same barriers. And so being able to convene as a community and talk about those things and strategize, first of all, around community healing, and secondly, around how to take that empowerment and really effect change in the larger sector, that's really set at the center of our work, even as we've grown as an organization from, a Facebook group to now a bona fide 501c3 organization with quite a lot of platform in the industry.
You use this word change, and the BOA has asked, requested, demanded change, and demonstrated change, signatory change and commitment. And yet, I know from our consulting work, change does not come easy. Derrell and Ibukun, it does not come easy. And I know that you believe that this change should be a hard right turn. It should be much different than incremental. And so I'd love for you to talk about what that looks like. What does hard right turn drastic change look like? And what will that kind of change do? What's the positive outcome of that kind of change versus incremental change?
Sure. Ibukun, you want to chime in
Sure.
first?
I sort of think of what the change will look like in practice when we're sort of at where we want to be, what that vision is. And to me, the vision is artists being able to have the careers that they want and exist sort of in the artistic spaces that they want, with the confidence knowing that they'll be respected and valued everywhere that they choose to go. And unfortunately, that's, sort of not the case now. But to me, that's what it looks like. It looks like a freedom for artists to be able to create in the way that they want to, without sort of facing barriers of discrimination or racial trauma, as they try to move through a creative space that hinders our creativity. So yeah, that's the vision that I have of what change really looks like.
And to your point, Jill, like this hard right turn, if you think about this, the beauty and the liberation, the justice of what Ibukun is outlining, then I think it makes more sense why there is a drastic need, an urgent need for change, as opposed to this attachment to incrementalism. You cannot delay someone else's justice when you have an opportunity to shift systems to allow for more freedom, right? Like, that's not an option. This is not a business plan. These are people's lives,
Right.
And so that really, I think, is why we felt it was necessary for us as an organization to intervene, because that really has been the tenor of the industry. It's like, oh, we'll do this year, or this year we're talking about Me Too. Next year it'll be Black Lives Matter. Then we'll talk about some trend. It's like it's much more about the moment as opposed to like true, authentic justice and what that looks like.
This interventional word is a powerful word. If you think about intervention,
Sure.
the pledge is written in a way that I think is practical and awesome in its practicality. These are things that organizations and people can and should be doing. And so I like this word, intervention, and I think the insistence and the impatience that you've described to me in conversation is required now and moving forward. And yet I've heard you say, if an organization, and there has been at least one who said, we're not doing this. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. But when that has happened, your response, what has your response been when that happens? So you're insisting, but also.
Yeah, I mean, there's also this sort of relentless desire to bring folks in.
Right.
No matter where we are on the journey, right? And so, as you say, there's an insistence, and yes, there's an impatience towards justice, but there's maybe less of an impatience with colleagues and more of just this relentless, like, this is what we're doing, and we want you to join us. But if you're not joining us right now, the train is going to keep moving forward, and hop on when you're ready, right? But we can't wait for each person, each organization to stall what we're trying to do. That's what has happened for decades. throughout
Yeah.
the industry, right? And so
Yeah.
that's really what it is. And so yes, there's an insistence that there's this relentlessness, but there's also this, if you want to have a meeting, if you want to have a sit down, can we host a round table, a panel? What can
Right.
help you understand the work that we're trying to do, and how you fit in it, and how you sitting this one out is not an option. It's not
Right.
a real option if you want to be a part of this movement.
Right. It's this polarity thing, you know,
Yeah.
if BOA's answer was, okay, then we're walking away from you, that doesn't accomplish the change. So I'm holding up and sort of witnessing to your strength of commitment and the strength of action that it takes to still engage, and I just want to celebrate it. I'm curious, Ibukun, about both of you, about the artist reaction to BOA. You spoke to it a little bit, but what do you hear in the artist community about this work? You're artists. What are you hearing?
Well, I think sort of all over the world, I think the pandemic has sort of spurred sort of a small labor movement almost, where like workers, and that includes artists, are sort of taking their power back or reclaiming the power that we have. And one of the things that I love about the work that we're doing is it's sort of returning the power of choice back to artists, where we can choose the kind of careers that we want to have, where we can choose the companies and the organizations that we want to engage with. And so what BOA sort of facilitates and reminds the industry of is that we're all watching, and we're all taking note of how institutions are moving, and we're making our choices accordingly. You know, I have heard artists say, you know, we're going to reconsider working with companies that haven't signed the pledge. And it's sort of what Derrell is speaking to the train is moving along, and that includes artists. We're moving along with or without, you know, institutions that, you know, choose to sign on or not. And so as we all move forward, the hope that we have is that institutions will get on board. And yeah, and artists are really, really excited to have that power back, to be able to make empowered choices again, or at least feel empowered to make choices again.
It's leverage.
Right.
That feels crucial in any relationship, you know. It ultimately,
Right.
all of this comes back to relationship. So much of everything comes back to relationship, and how can we be in better relationship with each other. Okay, so I know we will have questions, and I want to get to them. You've heard from Derrell about 85%, I think, of the opera field. What just characterize, we did the first release with you in April. What have you heard since then? What are you seeing from the field in response to the pledge in the data?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a little higher than 85% now, just since that first release. Thankfully, you know, that we're
Yes,
continuing
good.
to rise. But you know, the field overall, especially the conversations that we are having, is very open to this. You know, there are 1,000 different ways that folks are engaging this work, and it is very interesting to see, because I think we started out as coming off as like this separatist organization that's like demanding all of these things. You have to do this, you have to do this, or we're going to attack. And it's I think it has become into clarity that no,
Right,
these are people who are part of this art form. Like
right.
we are part of the family, of the community, and we just happen to have come together to really zoom in on these issues that are perpetuating systems of oppression, right? And so as folks are coming into that, understanding sort of the fragility that they may have started some of these conversations, some of these interactions with, as that is able to dissipate a bit, I'm finding that we are really, really cultivating spaces of a lot of sophisticated conversation around, you know, for example, we just had a conversation with colleagues from A houses, B houses, and C houses, and, you know, Opera America about this idea of asking for a company to report on an artist's race as opposed to that artist reporting on the artist's race. And there's like, well, we don't want to determine what race somebody is. We want everybody to decide for themselves. And I was like, yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But when you're hiring them, are you asking them, do you identify as Black? Because we have this strange implicit bias thing that we do sometimes. And if you identify as Black, we want to visit some of those systems onto, like that's just not how it works, right? And what I've been telling colleagues is we're not trying to trace the experiences of Black and brown folks in the industry. We are trying to trace the behaviors of the power agents in the field and how we must intervene. There's that word again, intervene, to dismantle these systems of, as I said, white supremacy and this systemic racism that has been baked into our system for decades.
Data. So we were thrilled, my colleagues, Eric Nelson and Jim DeGood, have been involved with you in this data discovery, and we've been thrilled to be in support of your work in this way. And yet, I know that data does some things, but it doesn't do everything.
Yeah.
So how is the data helping? What is the data doing for your work? And what has to go beyond data?
Yeah. Ibukun. I mean, Ibukun, I don't know if this was completely clear. I'm on a leadership team, but Ibukun is like actually one of the members of our data research team. And so I'm excited to hear about your experience.
Yeah. I mean, to me, numbers sort of they add a level of like gravitas to what we all already know. Like we already know, we are experiencing it. We see the stories, we see how what is happening. But I think a lot of times that can be sort of dismissed as anecdotal. And so what numbers do is sort of add a level of like weight to the story. I've been in situations where I'm explaining something to a company. I'm explaining, look, the diversity is not really happening the way you think it is. And then going back and counting numbers for them and then being like, oh,
right.
Oh, now we see it.
Right.
There's my favorite American poet, Sean J.Z. Carter, once said, numbers don't lie. Check the scoreboard. Like we can talk about the game and who's winning and losing in our opinions, but check the scoreboard. The numbers are not going to lie to you. Of course, that only goes so far, right? Like we can just look at numbers, but they only tell a part of the story. And so I think what our job is to get the story beforehand, crunch the numbers, and then connect those two, connect the story to the numbers and sort of get a full picture.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really beautiful and sort of comprehensive work that we're doing, and sort of rounding out the whole discussion.
And what one of my leadership council colleagues, Garrett McQueen, I've heard him say about the data, it's like it provides an unemotional lens through which to view this work that is necessary. And I think that's such an important sentiment, right? Because so frequently, and BIPOC folks know this very well, there are certain elements of whiteness, frankly, that are weaponized. And so, there have been conversations, for example, that we've coming to the table, let's get you signed onto this pledge. And there's this like, well, I feel attacked right now. Like I need to take this away and think about this. Or like, there was an incident where the one no that we've actually published, all of these people, even supporters of ours, like rushing to this woman's aid and defense. And what I've started to question folks is, what about this situation made you feel that she needed your defense more than we needed your defense, right? What about this situation had you believe that whatever the unknown information that existed was somehow in favor of her position versus our position? Might it exist that the word Black is in our name? Might it be because of how we function in this system, and how even as we empower ourselves as an organization, we are still a minority in terms of the power systems that exist, right? And so it's just such a strange thing as a Black activist to see, this person who has ton more power than our entire organization, even though we're like close to 1,000 members now,
Right.
like sort of create this platform where folks are coming as soldiers for her metaphorical, figurative tears, frankly. And
Yeah,
this has
right.
been written about with more ubiquity these last several years, which is, thank goodness.
Right, right. Sharing power.
Oh yeah.
It's there is
Sharing and ceding
right
power in
there.
some cases.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, in relationships, it's give and take, ebb and flow. We share. We learn this in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Ibukun talked about the dimensions of your work. And so it is the pledge, and it is the workbooks, and it is the data, but it's also other things, community work. Can one of you speak to, just give us a paragraph or two about that?
Yeah. Ibukun?
Yeah. I think everything, we talk a lot about, like, not we, but people say all the time, change starts at home. And so a lot of the work that we do is outward facing, but there's also a lot of care and healing and reconciliation and repairing that needs to go on within the community, because this organization and this community is built on a collective action. And so in order for us to be able to move effectively as a collective and as a unit, we need to strengthen our bonds with one another. And so a lot of the work that we have to do is sort of intra-communal in the family. We have a lot of family meetings and sort of hashing things out and getting ourselves together so that we can be a united front. And I think that's really important. And it's also really beautiful to be able to move into spaces knowing that, our family has our back.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And that's empowerment, right? That is
Right.
literally what it is, like this, having your courage have a little more leverage, and even if you have the courage to be an activist, to advocate for something, knowing that if it comes down to it, you have a community of folks who are going to back you up, who are doing similar things, who have created spaces for your reference, whether that be data, whether that be, the pledge, whether it be whatever, you now have some referential, posts to, like,
Right.
as the wind drags you here and for, to
Right.
hold on to. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Okay. So as Stephen comes on, I have one personal question for both of you. Data-driven. On a scale from 0 to 10, 0 being, on a scale from 0 to 10, how optimistic are you about change? 0 being, I don't see change happening anytime soon at all, and 10 being, I see change happening now, and I think not just my children, but I will see, or not just the next generation. I am confident that this work is creating an positive change. Where do you both sit on that spectrum?
Derrell, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm gonna have two answers. The first answer is the system as it exists now, where I sit in terms of how optimistic about that changing and the people who hold power changing is probably about a 4. Because we've seen, like, this is the most intense moment of, like, racial awakening, equity, EDI, like all of these things. And yet I'm still seeing people turn to their old fashioned ways of gaslighting and like trying to move back into spaces where they reclaim the power and don't have to, and can ignore organizations like BOA. But when I think about BOA and the power that we are sort of infusing our organization with, the ways in which we are cultivating strategy throughout the sector, it's a 10, because I know that we are going to change something. And so it's either going to be this industry as it stands right now, or it's going to be demolishing this one and building a new one, right? You know, figuratively, of course.
Yeah.
And so like I'm at a 10 in our ability to not only as an organization of Black people, but like also our ability to reach out to our Latinx, our Asian colleagues,
Yes.
you know, already, you
Yeah.
know, have created their own organizations, and our white allies and accomplices who are also coming into the fight in authentic and new strategic ways. All of that feels super optimistic at this point.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think as a Black artist collective, a collective of artists of color, I think that a lot of the work, and especially a lot of the intracommunal work that we're doing, is empowering us as individual artists to be able to, at the very least, carve out our own pockets of freedom.
Mhm.
And so that's where I feel
Mhm.
personally,
Mhm.
I feel really optimistic about my own pocket of freedom that I am created for, you know, for myself and for my colleagues and for my family. I would say also a 4. As far as the institution sort of as a whole, I do believe change will come. But I believe personally, I see myself as working for a change that is ahead of me, sort of planting seeds that somebody else is going to harvest.
Mhm.
And to me, that is my motivation, is that the people who come after me and after them will have a freer industry. And I think that makes me okay with maybe not seeing that for myself.
And
Yeah.
meanwhile, you're creating these pockets of change. I love that phrase. That's a powerful orientation, because every single person in this room can create pockets of change where they can have an impact and they can see it, even if the picture is slower to change than we desire. Not letting anything off the hook, just saying there's power and agency in that
Right.
motivation, for sure. Stephen, I know we have questions, and I have gone on here. I will love for you to join and make sure that we're hearing from people before we wrap up.
Yeah, sure. We're heading to the bottom of the hour. We're going to continue just a little bit past it. And if you're not able to continue to be with us, don't forget, we'll have this up on our website tomorrow. But we'll just take the time to answer these 2 questions. Michael asks, is there a way for companies to leverage Black Opera Alliance's work as a loyalty engine for new and existing patrons?
You know, I think that's something that can happen in the future. Right now, it's not one of the ways that we are working into any strategy. But like things like that, and even something like, you know, contacting grantors and asking that this kind of work and companies' commitment to this kind of work be a part of their determination process. You know, so all of those are vehicles. But, you know, one thing I will say, and this is to Jill's final question to us, if you hear about this work that Black Opera Alliance is doing and are discouraged or saddened by hearing these 2 folks who are practitioners of that work give it a 4 in terms of optimism, then have that be an impetus to do more, right? You know what, that question, Stephen, that's something that everybody can work on. It doesn't have to be Black Opera Alliance, right? You know, that's something that exists in a larger space that's not Black specific. And so I would love for folks to be empowered, encouraged by what you've heard today to actually go out and change systems in a way that is more activist, that is more advocacy oriented.
This final question here from Antonio. Why do you consider the required change drastic?
I think it's drastic because it's just not what we're used to. I think, you know, we're not used to really centering the needs and desires of Black artists in this industry. And from the work that we've seen and from sort of what we've been through and working with companies, it seems very out of character for a lot of people. It seems very outside of their sort of mode of operation. It's when we talk about it here, it seems very simple, but I guess in practice, it seems to take a lot more. So in that way, it's drastic. To me, it's common sense. It's common sense to take care of the people who work for you, who create your art, who, you know, make your company what it is. And so I think there's an opportunity to make it that easy. And sort of when you center taking care of the people who make your company, I think it can be. But as we see it now, it does seem sort of radical.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, for me, absolutely. Like I'm totally with Ibukun, and it really is centered around the difference between espousing values and, you know, saying like I believe in these things. I believe in justice. I believe that, you know, Black people are facing disparities and inequity, and like I want things to change in the favor of justice, right? There's a difference between that and like actually being a part of the movement that is intentionally actively
Acting
changing
differently.
systems, and understanding that here's this Black organization that is in existence to intervene, and part of that intervention is holding you as a predominantly historically white institution, or historically predominantly you know, I don't want to say white supremacist, but you know, like that, but that speak more to the systemic elements that are at play, and being like, I understand why I need to be held accountable. I understand why sometimes your advocacy is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be loud. It's going to be, you know, in our face. Like I get that, and I'm with you, and I will see you on the other end when there's more justice in our industry. That is drastic because no one in positions of power has had to make that kind of a concession before now, really before now. I mean, I think you can be about it, but you can also choose not to be about it. And what BOA is doing is creating an environment in which you don't have a choice. If you choose not to be a part of the movement, that is your choice. You know, it's like, and people will treat you as such, right? And including some artists, some artisans not being affiliated with your company, which I think is the ultimate goal of movements like ours, because the change really is that drastic, that much of an emergency as far as I see it.
Mhm.
There's a lovely article in Opera America magazine that I would refer to all of you that goes into some of this background, and it just reminds us about what's in the pledge. And I understand why the question would be asked, because the issue of recruiting, the issue of auditions and board composition, those things are not, those are systemic issues that are practical steps.
Yep.
And when you sign this pledge as an organization, the joy of it, I hope people might feel, is that it opens up the dialogue and the questions like, okay, so where are our auditions taking place? And does that make it easy? How are we recruiting for board members? What do, you know, the questions that get asked? And then it's not to Ibukun's point, it's not, these aren't drastic things. They're just change. And I think the pledge helps make it happen more quickly, maybe. And that's the intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the
Absolutely.
hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, both of you, it has been really, really a pleasure. Ibukun Babalola. It's a beautiful, beautiful last that I want to give voice to. And Dr. Derrell, Acon, just so grateful that you are with us today, and for your time and your energy and your action on behalf of this work, and for the invitation for TRG to be part of it. Stephen, always thank you for your partnership in TRG 30. And I don't, if there's anything else that you would say based on what you've seen in chat, I invite you to do it now.
Yeah, I'm just so grateful, first of all, for our partnership, for this opportunity. I would love to make just two acknowledgments. One, that here in LA, I'm on the land, the ancestral lands of the Tongva people. And also, anytime I'm in a space where I feel like new folks are hearing my voice, I want to just remind us to protect Black women, you know, and acknowledge all the Black women that have helped to get me to where I am.
Ibukun, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Derrell, thank you so much for the shout out to Black women. I really appreciate that. I should have looked up the land acknowledgements as well. I know that I'm on the land of the Muskogee people, as well as one other people, but I'm in Atlanta, and so that can be looked up. But thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited about this partnership, about the work that we're doing, and yeah, I hope that my number 4 will be increased with more cooperation from people in this room and outside of rooms. So thank you so much for having us and for giving us this opportunity to speak on this.
You're welcome. And everyone,
Thank
thanks
you.
for joining us again for TRG 30. I think I heard Stephen.
Yeah, I would just say to everyone, you can follow up and find more details about this latest insight report and future reports at trgarts.com. I know you have a webinar with our friends at Spectrix very soon too, and we'll send more details of that to you all after today's session. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.